We learnt, we failed basically, but we were making inroads. They're long sales cycles, we were building pipeline, and we were understanding, okay, what does it take to actually sell to enterprise? In January, we closed our first enterprise client. It was 1% of our revenue. Feb, it was 3%. March, it was 5%. Now in early July, it's a...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Next Big Thing HQ, where we interview founders and showcase startups raising capital. Today, we have an innovative founder, one who's revolutionizing the talent staffing industry and addressing the challenges of global talent management. Bill Kerr, founder of Athyna. Welcome on the pod.
Thanks, Connor. Thanks for having me. Congrats on the podcast. I'm excited to dive in and tell you a little bit about what we're building at Athyna.
Well, Bill, I appreciate you coming on. You currently are raising on WeFunder, and you have a little less than 3 weeks left in the round. So I know this is an incredibly busy time. It's a sprint at the end. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come on, talk about Athyna. But with that being said, I do want to jump into it. You founded Athyna to bridge the gap in remote staffing solutions, connecting top global talent with companies worldwide. With remote work now the new norm, why is this the perfect time for Athyna to make its mark?
Yeah, look, Athyna came by chance. I had my first startup was in adventure travel, believe it or not. I'd never worked in a startup, never worked in corporate before. I had traveled all over the world through my mid-20s and then decided I wanted to turn that into a business. Turns out we created a great brand and an incredible experience, but we never made any money. Travel is the worst business model known to man. But along the journey, because we weren't making any money, I actually had to be really resourceful about how I built the team. So we did really quite well for a few years with a really scrappy team, a scrappy global team. So this was before COVID, before everybody had kind of made the rush to remote work. So we had a small team in Latin America, a team in Asia. And what happened was I got introduced to a guy named Drew, who went on to become my co-founder originally. He left after the first year, super amicable, didn't want to build a startup and all that stuff. But in the original outset, so Drew was a business consultant and he had seen what we had built at VentureFit, my previous startup, with a really scrappy team. Being a business consultant, he had a kind of one-to-many business consultancy. And he said, hey, this is super interesting. I'm in the business of making businesses more money. How can we teach my cohort this? How can you help me with my business on this global teams idea? And then how can we filter that down to the 100 people that pay me to make their businesses more robust, make them more money? So it was a really nice time for it. I thought that it was where the world was heading. It was obviously for a long time, big business, enterprise tech, the outsourcing, offshoring world, that was all very established, but it wasn't really something that was typically done by small business, early stage startup. It was kind of like frowned upon or kind of like a furrowed brow. It was really weird because when people thought about global teams, they always thought about the Philippines and India. They thought of outsourcing, offshoring, BPO, call centers, virtual assistants. That's the things that they kind of thought. And I traveled to 60 countries before founding Athyna, backpacking, and I met people from all walks of life. It never made any sense to me that was the case. I thought there's incredibly talented people in South America. There's incredibly talented people all over Africa. Great schools, great English level, super motivated. Why do everyone just go, we're going to go to the Philippines and India and so forth. So I thought it was the right time in about 2019. First year went really well. We grew pretty fast. It was good. But then my co-founders left and COVID hit and we had a total kind of clean slate. We actually, the only time we made layoffs. And then as soon as we kind of started to find our feet again, we started to grow and everything started to take off. So yeah, it was just obvious that it was happening, this globalization of the economy really. And I think it just, COVID in 2020 really supercharged things and brought things forward maybe 10 or 15 years. But that's a long-winded way of kind of talking about how we got to be where we are today.
I think the idea and the model is great. From my end, I see a lot of this experience where a lot of founders, a lot of small businesses, they want to grow. They need a way to grow that's not as expensive as hiring someone, or maybe hiring someone who is a good talent, the best talent and the right fit for them. Don't want to go through a manual recruiter. So you created this business model, but you mentioned that you thought it was the right time. And so what were the trends that you were seeing back then that you ended up seeing play out now till 2024 and you think are going to continue to play out in the future that make you so excited about this business?
Well, I mean, as soon as the internet became part of our daily life, remote work was always coming. Every year since people started using the internet, there was an improvement in the ratio of people that were working globally, working remotely, people that were building global teams and so forth. So that was always going to continue. Like I said, it was a huge shock to the system in 2020 when COVID hit. I think that brought everything forward really quickly because people used to always assume that remote work would not work for my startup, remote work would not work for my company, company. It's just not something that would work for whatever reason. And then that was obviously all taken away. Our biggest objection was handled by a global pandemic. But I think one of the things that happens in startups and tech is the economy is cyclical. So there'll be boom times and there'll be bust times. And when there's bust times, people are looking for ways to improve the bottom line. And one way to improve the bottom line is to look after your resources and be smart with your headcount. So for example, one of the ways that I look at, well, when we were growing Athyna, in the very early days, you have to kind of understand your philosophy for where you're going to hire, your hiring philosophy. And then you have to, from that, understand your compensation philosophy. So in a hiring philosophy sense, when we started Athyna, we got to the point where we first hired a bunch of generalists. So we had in South America, in Southeast Asia, we had some generalist marketers, some generalist ops people, some generalist people in sales and so forth. And then when we got to this point of hiring marketers, I kind of had to look at it through the lens of, all right, cool. Well, surely if we're hiring a marketing team, our first marketing team, they're going to have to be boots on the ground. At this point in time, it was in Australia. That was our target market. Now it's the US. So as soon as I started to think about hiring the marketing team, I had to look through the lens of, okay, cool. I can hire a really great mid-level marketer in Australia, pay them $60,000 per annum, for example, or I can hire a really great mid-level marketer coming out of Argentina, which is basically a similar or as good of a tech ecosystem, startup ecosystem, and the salary is $15,000 per annum. So when times come like we're going through right now, where the market's a little slower, people are looking for profitability, and they also don't want to compete with big tech to try and find the best talent. So I think that trend is always going to ebb and flow. There's going to be people that are going to want to look for, in down times, opportunities to improve their bottom line. And when it's a boom time, people find it really difficult to compete on salaries and compete for the best talent. So when you think of the talent ecosystem in Latin America, in Africa, and parts of Asia, it's as strong as anywhere that's not the East Coast or the West Coast of the United States. East Coast and West Coast is probably the thickest talent ecosystem in the world. But I'm from Australia, and the Australian tech ecosystem gets a really big pat on the back. But the Latin American ecosystem, I live in Argentina right now. I've been here for 3 years nearly. The Latin American ecosystem is as strong. So now, 3 years, 4 years after COVID, you have the ability to, one, improve your bottom line as a company, two, hire the best talent, regardless of where they're from, and three, scale your company economically than you would have before. So basically, that's kind of some of the trends that we were seeing, and I think they're going to only accelerate in the future.
I think and another interesting point is that hiring from Latin America, South America, they're in the same time zone as we are. So you don't have to deal with that really tough communication of the outsourcing or talking to people who are currently working in India. And by the time they are kind of logging off, you might have just started logging on. So there's not a real good window to work. So I think that is a very interesting point that just makes it even more enticing to do the hiring. But I do want to talk about someone comes to Athyna, they want to hire. What's the end-to-end process? Can you walk us through the end-to-end process?
Yeah, so typically right now we work with two buyer personas, if you will. So we have early stage startups and we have the VP of engineering at an enterprise. So we're talking to founders really in the early stage side, and then we're talking to a VP of engineering on the enterprise side. So for example, it's a funny question that you ask actually, because the process is changing as we speak, the process of what it looks like to work with Athyna. And I'll tell you exactly why, because it's actually quite interesting. So basically, say we've got an earlier stage startup. So it's a Series A company, they've raised some money, they want to double their engineering headcount, for example. So we get sent a job description that would be 3 front-end engineers as soon as we can get them effectively. So typically, what would happen with Athyna, or what would happen with recruitment in general, is you would have a job description, sales or account management is working with that. Then they'll pass that across to recruiters. Recruiters will work with their sourcer. The sourcer is the SDR of a recruitment function, if you will. And then you might hand the role over once it's onboarded to customer success. So this whole process takes around normally like 7 days for non-technical talent. That's like a go-to-market role, operations, go-to-market, finance, for example. And then maybe 10 to 14 days for a technical role. So front end, back end, full stack. But more bespoke roles, it might take a little longer, and so on and so forth. So we have a really high standard, really great churn, really high NPS at Athyna in general, in terms of the way we've always done business. But right now, just as things are changing with the AI revolution, I guess you would call it. So today, our process looks like this, and this has only changed in the last 3 months. So technically, this is just coming out of closed beta. But today, instead of that process being account manager and sales, passing to recruiter and the sourcer and so on and so forth, what happens today is instead of a 7-day process, we get a job description from a, let's say, Series A startup. Like I said, the information gets passed across all the talents in our talent pool. So we have over 100,000 talents in our network, and we have over 20,000 that are vetted talents. So these talents in our vetted talent pools, basically our AI, which is built, our matching index, which is built on top of OpenAI's 4.0, it'll basically take the information that's in the job description, it'll pass it across the talents in our platform, and it'll come back to the recruiter immediately and it'll say within seconds, hey, here's the top 15 talents based on the job description that we were sent, ranked from 83% match to a 96% match. So this happens immediately now. now. The thing with recruitment is a game of speed. If you think about candidates are either active or they're passive. If they're active, they're actively looking for a role, which means you're immediately, as soon as you reach out to this person, if they're active, you're already competing with all the other jobs that are on the market, internal processes and offers, and so on and so forth. So the moment you reach out to a passive candidate and they respond to you, hey, yeah, I'll take a phone call, that candidate is now active. You're never actually communicating with a passive candidate. The moment a passive candidate replies to you, they're an active candidate. And what an active candidate does, even if they love the offer that you're giving them, even if they've loved the process of the recruitment and meeting the team and so forth, they're going to check the market. They're also going to go to their internal, they're going to go to their manager, they're going to say, hey, look, I got an offer. Can you make me a counter offer? So you're always up against the clock in a recruitment process. Recruitment is absolutely a game of speed because the best talent don't stay on the market for very long. That's just a fact of the matter. So today, like I said, typically recruitment has worked in the way that I mentioned earlier, 7 to 10 days for a non-technical talent. Today with us, so we have our matching index, which will basically do the sourcing role really, really quickly. But then what will happen there is which is about to get released this quarter, we have an AI companion, which some of these tools will spin out to offer as a product. But our AI companion, think of it as like Gong for recruiters. So it will join your recruitment call. And what it'll do is it'll rank the call on a number of facets. So it'll rank the English of the candidate. It'll be ranked on the communication, pronunciation, cadence, so on and so forth. We're toying with body language assessment. The jury's still out. We're still not 100% sure on body language assessment, but it'll also rank the quality of the conversation. So for example, if one of our recruiters, let's do this front-end engineer role again. So front-end engineer role comes across, it's passed across our talent pool, and the top 15 candidates are sent to our recruiter from a 83% match to a 96% match. Notifications are sent out to those talents. Hey, we've got a role with a Series A startup in San Diego. They're really excited to talk. Are you interested? Once they join a call with a recruiter, that recruiter has our AI companion and it'll transcribe the call. So that takes away some of the work for recruiters, but then it'll also give English level assessment and it'll also do an assessment on the quality of the call. Let's say one of the talents was ranked 88%, which was the 6th highest ranked talent on the first initial sourcing through our matching index. What will happen is if they have an unbelievable call with the recruiter still is able to see it and meet and build relationships with the candidate. But what will happen is the AI will say, hey, that was an awesome interview. We're actually going to uprank this candidate from an 88% match to a 94% match, which actually might mean, hey, this is the number one ranked candidate we have so far. So then next is coding challenges and so on and so forth. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to make an existing business model, which is outsourcing, offshoring, IT services, talent marketplace, whatever umbrella you want to put us under. We're trying to take business model that's existed for a very long time and it's going to exist for a very long time more. And we're trying to make it really, really scalable thanks to automation, replacement, and optimization through AI. And we're trying to make it bias-free and a high quality product. So it's pretty exciting. The process is changing really fast and it's cool to be building stuff that's going to be... Let me give you an example actually. One of our advisors, investor/advisors, is a guy named Bryce Maddock. He's co-founder and CEO of a company called TaskUs. TaskUs are listed under the ticker TASK. They've been around for about 15 years and they're in a very similar business model to us. They build global teams. TaskUs have 180 clients and they do $1 billion in revenue. It's crazy. It's an incredible business, an incredible execution from Bryce and the team. I cold emailed Bryce. He was the number one advisor I wanted in the world. In 2022, they had NRR, net revenue retention, of 148% month on month on average, which is, people talk about the best, crazy. It's crazy. People talk about the best NRR in the world and people always talk about Zapier. Zapier is like famous for 140+% NRR. TaskUs, IT services, outsourcing, staffing, whatever you want to call it. Again, 148%. 2023 was different. It was lower, but 2022, 148% month on month. And I reached out to Bryce when I discovered TaskUs. I only reached out to one person in the world and said, hey, Bryce, I'm building something really similar. Got a great team. Here's a little bit about 93% engagement with the team. Just building heaps of cool tech. Here's a bit about me. We jumped on a call and within about 15 minutes of the call, I was telling Bryce about what we were doing, taking an existing industry and trying to make it scalable, make it efficient, make it scalable, take out the bias. And Bryce said, hey, this is awesome. This is the future of our industry. I'm in. What do you need from me? Then we went through, okay, cool. I want you to be an advisor. He ended up investing with his co-founder and so forth. But recruitment hasn't changed for a very long time. And it's kind of cool and exciting to be at least on the forefront of making some of these changes, trying to see, okay, what does the future of recruitment look like in 2025, 2026, 2027?
Well, I have a lot of questions from that. I think the first question is, what does recruitment look like? Let's just say 2030. When I think about it in my head, I hear what you're doing with this AI companion and I'm thinking, well, at some point, are you going to be able to take the human out of it? So the human just throws in a description and then the AI companion, almost more of an agent at that point, then can go find whoever checks off the boxes, does a video interview, and then comes back and just says almost immediately, immediately, instantaneously, hey, these are your top 3 guys, top 3 people. You should probably think about hiring one of them. Is that the future, or do you think your future is maybe even more extreme, or do you think that's a little bit of a stretch to be there in 2030?
No, look, I mean, nothing's a stretch today considering AI. We don't know if large language models are a fast track ticket to artificial general intelligence, or if they're going to be something that we use to make funny memes and GIFs. And we don't know the extent of the technology right now. But I think, look, recruitment is sales. And in any element of sales, there, I think, often needs to be some human element. So what we're trying to do is take a business model that's not super scalable and make it scalable and efficient. I'm not sure if, I mean, marketplaces exist, like a talent marketplace. What we do is full-time, long-term roles. So those roles aren't typically suited to an Upwork or a Fiverr or a freelancer where you can have a relationship that happens over a few clicks and a few DMs. So there's a bit of a hurdle there. I think there's always going to be a relationship on one side. So maybe there's a recruiter that actually doesn't do really any of the interviews, any of the talent matching, but they do the sales on the side of the talent side. So rather than having to do all the grunt work, they're just the person that sells the opportunity. I think there's, to take it all away, you'll be able to vet talent for sure with AI really, really well by 2030. And there's even before that, you'll be able to know, hey, this person's a really good fit for this role, so on and so forth. But in recruitment, in partnering with marketplaces, operators, talent networks, and so forth, there needs to be some level of selling, hey, we've got this role with a Series A company. They're really exciting and we think you'd be a really good fit for it. There's going to be an element of that. What I think will happen though, so for example, with Athyna, people's availability for incredible jobs is about to explode. So on our product roadmap, we have a Chrome extension for job seekers. So optimizes your LinkedIn profile, your resume, and uses our matching index for jobs on LinkedIn for job seekers around the world. We've built that. We're building our AI companion. We've built our matching index, and we're building a bunch of other tooling. But one of the biggest core pieces of Athyna in the future will be a global jobs board. And what the future will look like in this case is a global jobs board that does the work for you. So instead of you spend hours and hours and hours trying to find the best jobs that suit your needs, trying to perfect your CV, trying to update your resume so it suits the roles that you're looking for, this will all be done via AI. So by the end of 2024, we'll have our jobs board launched. So we have Athena's Jobs, which is really, really great. We have a great employer brand. We have really strong application. We never have to spend any money on talent marketing. But by the end of 2024, we'll have our global jobs board built, which will scrape all the remote jobs from all around the internet. And we're building tooling so that people have the ability to land the job of their dream, improve their quality of life, improve their salary. So that will be coming down the pike really soon. And tools that will help not only find the job and do the grunt work of the jobs board, but also help people prepare for jobs. So for example, today, again, just thinking of the things that we're currently building and the things that are just coming out in market. So we built our Chrome extension for job seekers, and today, version 1, what it does is it ties into your LinkedIn, and you can update your LinkedIn using best practices through AI throughout the process. You can also take your current CV and you can optimize that against a job description. So, hey, I'm really interested in this job. Can you tweak my resume, tweak my CV in order to make it pop for this particular role? But what we're building next is interview prep. So we're in the final stages of a potential acquisition for some tech around this. And if that doesn't go through, we'll build it ourselves. But basically, it's an algorithm that has collated hundreds of hours of interviews from best jobs in the world, and it gives you interview coaching. These tools have been shown to double the interview to hire ratio when used well. So if you think about a candidate, and in the past, you would have to, so companies using these, but if you can use them on the B2C side, if you're a candidate and you might have to have 100 applications for roles in the past, you might have to do 50 interviews, that's all going to change. It might be in the future that you have 30 jobs that you apply to, but they were sourced better thanks to AI and machine learning. And you might have 10 or 20 interviews, but you've done interview prep. So you're well prepared, you're ready to go, you know the questions that you're going to be asked, and you have a much higher chance to win that, job of your dreams. So yeah, I think the future is exciting. I think with AI, I'm not sure how much AI will run the show, how much humans will be involved. I think, like I said, I think recruitment is a sales role, selling opportunities to people. And especially when they're high value opportunities, it's harder to do that in a marketplace setting. But there's definitely some pretty interesting technology coming down the pipe in the next years that will really help both job seekers and hiring managers alike just make better matches.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And then I also love what you're doing with helping the people applying for jobs to be better informed, better prepared when it comes to the interview. I think that's an incredibly important aspect. Now, I do want to talk about your raising on WeFunder. The round ends July 31st, right?
Yeah.
So the round ends July 31st. So for the listeners out there, the potential investors, where is the capital going to be allocated? You already mentioned a little bit about the potential acquisition. Where else is the capital going to be allocated? And then what opportunities are you seeing? Where are the growth opportunities going forward?
So basically the round is the WeFunder element of the round is the finalizing of a $2.5 million round that we did with creators and angels over the last kind of 4 months. We actually did a fascinating raise. So I'm a creator. When I say creator, I don't mean creative. I mean B2B media brand guy. I'm not going to call myself a brand, but I have a newsletter that has around 40,000 subscribers, founders, investors, and leaders in tech. Kind of read it on a weekly basis. So we've never spent money on Meta and Google really, which is really great. We've always grown through outbound email, and our next channel that we've been really honing, and it's been working really well for us over the last 12 months, is owned audiences, marketing through owned audiences. Owned audiences being newsletters and podcasts. So you think of the biggest newsletters in the world, Lenny Rachitsky comes to mind, biggest podcast, the Acquired podcast, so on and so forth. So this round, we actually did a $2 million round with creators that are some of the biggest B2B tech creators in the world. So that was incredible. We partnered with 15 creators on the round. So we have effectively 15 of the world's fastest growing B2B creators on our side. Some of them took small allocations. Some of them took really large allocations. And it's actually awesome because if you think about everybody today, so if you go and raise, let's say a company goes and raises $1 million, let's say 2 million, same as our creator round. Somebody goes and raises $2 million today, 40% of that money still goes to Google and Meta. It's basically the tax, the startup tax. And a study came out recently that in the last 12 months, the return on investment for Meta was 78 cents. So people are taking 40% of their round and they're going and putting it in the money capital inferno that is Google and is Meta, and they're getting less than $1 back. So that's cool, but growth at all costs is not really the world we're living in today. So our creator round, we gave $1 million of equity for ads to one of the biggest B2B newsletters in the world, founded by a famous tech personality. And so I won't go into exactly who it is, but then the other 13 or 14 creators that we partnered with, we gave them no money down equity in Athyna, and mainly in exchange for unsold ad inventory, because every creator brand has unsold ad inventory. So that might be 5% monthly, it might be 80% fill rate, 20% of that will go to waste. So we basically partner with creators. Instead of having media that goes to waste, unsold ad inventory, we're capitalizing on that, and that becomes Athyna ad inventory, because rather than it go to waste, it's basically injecting value into their media brands. And the awesome thing is everybody had no money down investment into Athyna, and let's say one of our creators might have gotten $50,000 for their investment, but they're at one stage today in terms of size. In 6 months' time, they're going to be 30% bigger. In 12 months' time, they're going to be 60, 70, 80% bigger. Next year, they're going to be 2.5 times bigger, and we're going to scale with them. Our first creator that we onboarded, we had a positive ROI within 3 weeks through referrals, and this is competing against our competitors that are going and spending $1 to make 78 cents back. So it's super exciting and super innovative. And the rest of the round so far has been filled in with angels, the angels that I mentioned earlier. So Bryson and his partner Jasper from TaskUs, and a bunch of other angels that I have in our network. So the WeFunder was the ability to open up a couple of $100,000, maybe up to $500,000 for our community. And yeah, it should be really exciting. So we're in a good position where operationally profitable as of today, I think, which is kind of coincidental and kind of crazy. So any money that comes in will basically go to R&D and growth. The good thing about the growth side is we've never really raised a whole lot of money. So we've always known how to grow really efficiently. Unlike, people that were founded in 2018 and raised $500 million in the 2020, 2021 kind of vintage, it's really hard to undo bad habits. We've never really had those bad habits. So any money that comes in, we have really economical CAC and a good CAC to LTV, we can spend it well. So that's the economics of the round. It all happened really quickly, and it's been cool to do something innovative, I guess.
I think that's great. And I think I always like the opportunity of allowing anyone to invest alongside angel investors and other professional investors. I think that's an incredible opportunity. But you did mention how you and Athyna have really good habits. You are currently now profitable. And you said your advisor, Bryce, achieved 140% net revenue retention. So my question is, what is the key for you and Athyna to achieve a very similar net revenue retention of 140 plus? When you look at that, what are the 3 fundamentals that you and Athyna need to do in order to hit that number?
Yeah, that's actually a fascinating question and a really good one. So NRR, net revenue retention, really for any subscription business, any recurring revenue business should be the God metric, more or less. I mean, most people would agree if you kind of ask them that question, because a few percentage points of churn can be the difference between a really good small business and a really strong business. A few percentage points more, and it's a really strong business to a phenomenal business to a global unicorn and so forth. So it's really important. important. When I met with Bryce for the first time, we kicked off our advisory work. So I said to him something that had been in my mind. I said, hey, look, the reason I had you in my sights as the number one advisor, the only advisor I really wanted around the world, was because of your NRR. I think it's incredible, the business that you've built. So I want you to help me, do the same. Here are the three things that I think you should help us with. First, breaking into enterprise. And I'll talk more about how we're going there in a moment. Second, NRR and churn. And third, operational efficiencies. There's a million different things that you could see inside of our organization that we could fix. So I said, these are the things that I think we should be focusing on. And Bryce said to me, okay, great. Let's focus solely on number one, because number one will take care of number two. And number three doesn't even become that important at that stage. And that is true. The difference between enterprise business and working with small business is there's a reason why companies, most companies put most of their marketing budget towards enterprise, because they're bigger accounts, ability to expand more, much more stable and lower propensity for churn. So with Athyna, before I had Bryce as an advisor, we started pushing into enterprise. We're about 5 years in now. And for the first 4 years, we stayed well clear of enterprise because they're longer sales cycles. You have to be secure. You have to be compliant. It's just a different kettle of fish, of course. So about 12 months ago now, we decided strategically, hey, we're going to really start to push up market. That's what we want to do. For the first 6 months, so all of the second half of last year, we didn't close an enterprise client. We learnt. We failed basically, but we were making inroads. They're long sales cycles. We were building pipeline and we're understanding, okay, what does it take to actually sell to enterprise? In January, we closed our first enterprise client. It was 1% of our revenue. Feb, it was 3%. March, it was 5%. Now in early July, it's 11.5% of our revenue. So by the end of 2024, with our pipeline that we have today and with the trajectory that we're on, it should be around 25% of our revenue. Now, that's the first thing. So to try and win as much enterprise business as possible. And the second thing, and this is what Bryce and his team did really well, is to understand what type of talent is the stickiest talent in the world that you can serve to a client. So Bryce and TaskUs, for example, well, they have the Magnificent Seven basically as their biggest client. So one of their biggest...
It's a pretty good client.
Yeah. And I shouldn't say the names, but I've just told you the names basically, but I'm not sure if it's public knowledge or not. Content moderation. So which companies in the world have content moderators? I guess you could probably see where I'm going with this. Yeah. The content moderators, so they'll have 2,000 content moderators in a building that are working for Silicon Valley big tech. And these content moderators are always scaling. So they're always needing more and more seats as the company grows, more and more seats on content moderation. And then also it's a one-to-one replacement. So it's really sticky talent. Obviously devs, engineering, cloud engineer, AI, machine learning, these are all really sticky roles. So, but it's really about finding, okay, cool. Who are our best clientele? How do we find them? How do we close them? And then what is the talent that they want that's going to stay longest with them? So we're in a really good position today breaking into the enterprise side, and we have a reasonable understanding of the talent side, but we really need to continue to hone that. Building the enterprise book of business is working and it will continue to work, but how do we actually capitalize on that? And that's that second piece, which is, all right, cool. How do we make this relationship the greatest relationship in the world? How do we find the stickiest talent that these companies need and that they will stay long term? So that's kind of that's the plan.
The interesting thing is finding the sticky talent is going to decrease the churn, which means it's going to make the business look a lot better. It's going to solve a lot of the problems, which is going to address the third point, which is operational efficiencies, right? It funnels down and one leads to the next, which leads to the next. And kind of hearing you paint the picture, that makes so much sense to me. And I can see how it's a great business model, especially once you figure out how to win the enterprise business. It's easier to make $1 million selling to 10 people than making $1 million selling to 100,000 people.
100%. It's a better business to be in, a much less stressful business to be in. It's the way good businesses are run.
100%. Now we're getting close on time, so I was going to ask you just a couple rapid questions. First is, what is the most influential book you've read, or a book that you would recommend someone to read, like business oriented, that's really just helped shape your perspective on how you approach Athyna, how you approach your day-to-day work?
I'm an avid reader, audiobooks and physical books. So I'm reading The Handmaid's Tale right now, and I'm audiobooking Dune 3 and Liar's Poker. But
Liar's Poker is good.
100%. In answer to your question, I think the most transformative book for me wasn't particularly a business book, but it wasn't particularly not. It was probably How to Win Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie, 100-year-old book. Some of their business, I think 1/3 of their business nearly comes from, it's more self-development, I guess, rather than business per se. But business is about relationships, right? Whether it's your employers, whether it's your employees, whether it's your partners, investors, whether it's the media, PR, whoever it is, you're always building relationships. And the best way to build relationships is to win people over. How to Win Friends and Influence People. When I picked up a copy of the book, I thought, well, this is the corniest title in the world. How can people just rave about this book? And then I read it it and I thought, oh my God, this is a book that I need to read every 6 months for the rest of my life because it's going to make my life better. I haven't read it every 6 months for the rest of my life. I have reread it 2 or 3 times. I think it's a really great book to try and just bring back the fundamentals of how to be a good person and how to win people to your side, how to make friends, how to make allies, and that's going to really pay dividends in business. So I would say How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That's a great pick. I love that book. I need to definitely read up on it again. Some of the stuff is very common sense, but you haven't heard it vocalized before, and then reading it really makes sense. And then you're like, oh, when this person does that same thing, it makes me feel that way. I just realized it was in the book, then I
remembering people's names. One of my best friends, I was best man at his wedding. So his name's Corey. There's a guy named Lindsay Fox in Australia, and he's a transportation magnate, one of the richest people in Australia. I mean, this is like 20 years ago he's still probably quite wealthy. I don't know much about him these days. But Corey told me a story once, my best friend. He said, I know why Lindsay Fox is incredibly successful, and I'll tell you why. And I said, okay. And so Corey was 17 years old, and he was with his uncle. His uncle's 40 years old, and he was a landscaper. He was a handyman, basically. And Corey was working with his landscaper uncle, and he used to look after Lindsay Fox's property in Portsea, which is a holiday destination in southern Victoria in Australia. So Lindsay Fox would come down there every so often, and he knew everybody that worked on his property and so on and so forth. He would come up and say hello, and really gregarious, really friendly guy. So Corey was this 17-year-old kid, and he was a really talented cricketer. So cricket is very popular in Australia. And Lindsay came this one day when Corey was working with his uncle, and he walked up and he said, oh, Brad, how you going? His uncle's name's Brad. Oh, and who's this? He said, oh, yeah, this is my nephew, Corey. Oh, g'day, Corey. Nice to meet you. What do you do with yourself, Corey? And Corey says, oh, well, I'm just finishing school. I play cricket. I like to play cricket. He said, oh, yeah. Are you any good? Are you making any runs? Corey said, oh, well, actually, I just got chosen to play in this representative tournament in the seniors for the first time. So it was a really big event for Corey. He was a 17-year-old kid, and he got chosen to play in the men's representative comp of the local competition, basically. So, oh, yeah, cool. That's great. Good luck with it, Corey. All the best. That was the relationship. That was all that it was. And then what happened was around 4 or 5 years later, Corey's 22, 23 years old, and he lives in Sereno, the place where Lindsay Fox has the holiday house, and he's walking down the street and he bumps into Lindsay Fox. And Lindsay literally walks straight in and says, oh, Corey, oh my God, mate, I could not believe it. I was thinking of you and I thought, when am I going to see Corey again? How did you go on your cricket tournament? And Corey just said, he said, I had never felt more cared about, in my whole entire life. And I think that's like one of those tiny little principles you get from How to Win Friends and Influence People. When Corey told me that story, I started a habit. I've got a terrible memory. I started a habit of whenever I meet someone for the first time, I write their name in my phone. And what it does is it helps me because I see it visually as well as I say their name. Oh, yeah, cool. Connor, yeah, nice to meet you. No worries. I walk away. Not every single person, but I really try to. Connor, hey, the guy that I had the podcast with, really cool guy, talked about this and this. Yeah. And it helps me recall their name. And then sometimes, very rarely, I'll look at my phone before I go on and meet with someone or bump into someone or whatever. But it's just that little thing. I try and still do that because I know the greatest compliment you can pay to someone is to remember their name. It's the number one thing in life. Is the worst thing in the world is we've all felt it when you rock up and somebody says, hey, buddy, you think, oh, man, they don't remember my name. It's really a terrible feeling. So the book's filled with those little reminders of how to be a good person, and they go super duper far.
Yeah, and they're so small, yet they make such a big difference. And I think that example of Corey was a prime example of that. 2 questions. Advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, someone young, just starting. What advice would you give them?
Advice to aspiring entrepreneurs is don't fear failure, I guess. I think if you're aspiring to be an entrepreneur, then, taking the plunge and trying to go and create that thing or improve upon that part of the world that you're passionate about. I think taking the plunge and going and doing it, we all fail at things. So don't be afraid of failure. The sun will rise the next day and you will go on with your life. You will learn and your loved ones will still be there. So making sure you actually take the first step. And then also, I think if you are in an early stage startup and you're really trying to, get it off the ground and so forth, one thing I've always gone back to in business and has always worked well for me is I've always had a philosophy to really over-index on 2 things, and that's brand and culture. My kind of thinking around that is if you have a strong brand, you have the ability to win incredible talent to your side to come and work. That's number 1. And if you have an incredible culture, that amazing all-star talent that you have in your company, they're going to be motivated to do their best work. So if you have an amazing bunch of all-stars that are motivated to come into work every day, if you have a crappy product, a busted go-to-market strategy, if you have this problem, that problem, problem, you're probably going to have a really good chance of figuring it out with that on your side. You've got all-stars and they're motivated to do their best work. So for me, I've always, myself and Athyna and everything that we've prioritized, we've always over-indexed on brand and culture. And I think it's the one thing that can really, optimize your whole organization.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer that culture is the most important thing, not only just with building a company, but I mean, if you look at any team, any leader, coach, I mean, they always just focus so much on culture because it's the one thing that allows you to scale your values that you hold dear to your heart as a leader, as a founder, as a CEO, you name it, to the rest of the team members so that they can figure out how to operate at the level you want them to operate. And last and final question, where's Athyna going to be in 5 to 10 years?
Athyna in 5 to 10 years will be the central hub for how people find remote work online. So whether that's hiring managers looking for the best talent to add to their organization, or whether that's really talented job seekers that are looking for that next amazing role. With the job board that we plan to release later this year, with our current trajectory and product suite, we'll be the central hub that all the spokes of remote work are built upon. That's the strategy for us, and I think we can do it.
That's an exciting strategy. I'm excited to cheer you on and see what the future holds for Athyna. Bill, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. Where can all the listeners and viewers out there find you? Ask you a question if they have a question.
The best place is I'm most active on LinkedIn. My handle, if you want to search me, is /the Bill Kerr. I also can be found on my newsletter, which is a great place for people to kind of follow along the Athyna story and also learn from other entrepreneurs. We do interviews with really successful founders. We do deep dives on great businesses and great leaders of the past. So that's opensourceceo.com. I think, knowing a bit about you and a bit about your brand, I know that all of your listeners would really love it. I don't take things too seriously. I like to make it entertaining, but that would be the two places I would say. So anybody's got questions or is looking for remote talent or just wants to say hello, the Bill Kerr. You can just search Bill Kerr, but the handle, the handle is the Bill Kerr on LinkedIn and Open Source CEO, which we have 40,000 subscribers now, and really proud of my writings there too. So that would be the places.
Well, Bill, I appreciate you coming on. And then for all the listeners out there, Athyna's closing its round on WeFunder July 31st, so go check them out. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Bill, I appreciate you. Until next time, so long.